Hey, everybody. So, once again, we are back talking a little bit more science. And yes, again, traveling the world. This time we are in China. This is the same trip from where I got to travel the world. This time I got to go on the Great Wall of China. Now, I want to talk a little bit about other cultures and talking about social justice and science. And, I started putting some even little things like these travel abroad because I think for me, learning about other cultures really opened up my eyes in many different ways. Um, in the last module, I gave you an activity, and I asked you to list for me a famous astronaut. Now, not everyone, but most everyone gave me John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and they're all, amazing individuals and all right, but that was the bulk of the astronauts that people gave. Sally Ride? What about some others? And why do we think that is? Why do we think that these individuals are the ones that pop into our head? White males, individuals that look like me. Well, let's do a little activity before we think too much about that. In your assignment, in your activity sheet, I want you to name the first scientist that comes to your mind. Okay? After you do that, come back to the video. Now what I want you to do is I want you to list the name of a female scientist. Who's the first female scientist that pops in your head? Write that down. Now, if we eliminate Jane Goodall and Marie Curie, who is another female scientist that pops into your head? Well, what about the next two questions? Name a famous scientist that's African American. Name a famous scientist that's Hispanic. Now, this is an activity, and it's not, there are some much larger issues that we're going to be talking about regarding STEM and social justice. What we're going to be doing next module is I'm going to be showing you a strategy that we can start to have some of these difficult conversations. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Um, I realized I had a problem with this. And when I came to this realization was that I was in Georgia and I was teaching in Georgia before I started teaching in Florida. And Georgia adopted something called EdTPA. Now, EdTPA is a program where you create this portfolio and you send it out to external reviewers, and they basically judge if you're competent enough, I guess is the best word, that if you should become a teacher. Think of it like a bar exam that lawyers have to go through. You got to pass a bar in order to be able to practice. Well, this is a portfolio assessment to show whether or not you're competent to be able to become a teacher. And I remember looking over the different requirements. And one of those requirements was, how are you promoting culturally responsive practices in your teaching? And my knee-jerk reaction was, I'm a physics teacher. What is there in culturally responsive in physics and in physics? And it hit me. If I don't understand it as an instructor, how do I expect my students to be able to understand it? How do I expect the teachers that I'm training to be able to address these issues of science and equity and social justice? I have an 11-year-old daughter now who is excited about STEM, excited about coding. I want to make sure that she stays this way. So we're going to look at next module. We're going to look at some strategies in order to do that. But first, I also want to really focus on some of the deeper underlying issues that that STEM's facing as a whole. So I'm going to show you two videos, and I want you to think about these. So the first one that I'm going to bring up, uh, this was a panel discussion with very popular scientists, Dawkins, Tyson, Druin, Sanger Grove. This was a panel discussion about science and society, science and religion, a lot of these different topics. And you're not gonna spend an hour watching the video. You can if you want to go back, you have the link. But when the panel gets opened up for questions, I want you to pay attention to the very first question that's asked.
The Larry Summers question. What's up with tricks in science?
Now, I'm going to repeat the question for you, and it infuriates me every time I hear it. But the question was, what's up with chicks in science? Now, I would love to slap him if I were there. I wasn't there. Watch. I mean, there's some nervous laughter. I swear this person was going to get up and smack him.
The Larry Summers question. What's up with tricks in science?
I just look at her here. Now listen to the moderator.
Slightly off topic, nonetheless interesting. Yeah.
It's science education.
Yeah, right. Does anyone want to field maybe if there are genetic differences between men and women that explain why more men are in science? Anyone want to touch that?
Now, the moderator for Mike George, if coming out for the 9 years I was there, bless his heart, tries to turn the question into something that maybe might not be as offensive. But again, if you look at the bulk of the people here, older white males, balding, a lot of them, I can go back here, and you look here again, balding white males, a lot of them are that category. So I want you to pay close attention before you get fired up too much about the response that was given here.
There are genetic differences between men and women that explain why more men are in science. Anyone want to touch that?
I've never been female, but I have been black my whole life, and so let me perhaps offer some insight from that perspective, because there are many similar social issues related to access to equal opportunity that we find in the black community as well as the community of women in a white male-dominated society. And I'll be brief because I want to try to get more questions. When I look at, throughout my life, I've known that I wanted to do astrophysics since I was 9 years old, a first visit to the Hayden Planetarium. I was a little younger than Victor at the time. I was, although he did it before I did. And so I got to see how the world around me reacted to my expression of these ambitions. And all I can say is the fact that I wanted to be a scientist and astrophysicist was hands down the path of most resistance through the forces of nature, forces of society. Anytime I expressed this interest, teachers would say, don't you want to be an athlete? Or don't you want to? I want to become something that was outside of the paradigms of expectation of the people in power. And so fortunately, my depth of interest in the universe was so deep and so fuel enriched that every one of these curveballs that I was thrown in, fences built in front of me and hills that I had to climb, I just reached for more fuel and I kept going. Now here I am, I think, one of the most visible scientists in the land, and I want to look behind and say, well, where are the others who might have been this? And they're not there. And I wonder what is the blood on the tracks that I happen to survive that others did not, simply because of the forces of society that prevented at every turn, to the point where I have security guards following me as I go through department stores, presuming that I'm a thief. I walked out of a store one time and the alarm went off, and so they came running to me. I walked through the gate. At the same time, a white male walked through the gate, and that guy just walked off with the stolen goods, knowing that they would have stopped me and not him. That's an interesting sort of the exploitation of this, what a scam that was. I think people should do that more often, all right?
Shopping with
So my life experience tells me that when you don't find blacks in the science, you don't find women in the sciences, I know that these forces are real, and I had to survive them in order to get where I am today. So before we start talking about genetic differences,
Right.
you gotta come up with a system where there's equal opportunity, then we can have that conversation.
Okay. So I want you to take that in. I want you to reflect on that video. So in your modules and your worksheets, you have a question talking about it. So I want what's going through your mind? What are you thinking? Put it into words. So pause it, come back, I'll talk a little bit more. And this was something that's been resonating with me, that I've been thinking a lot more about when we're talking about social justice and talking about the need for advocates. And I really think about that. I think about how, as I've grown, as I've learned more, as I've become more educated, those type of things really start hitting home. I have a BS in astrophysics as well. I was never questioned. Nobody ever asked me, why do you want to be in astrophysics? All of my classmates, white males, exception of one or two females who are part of the program. If you look at engineering, and we're going to talk some more a little bit about that, the number of female engineers, how it is dwarfed in comparison to the number of males. And I don't know how loud to say this and what you can do with it, but STEM is not a boys club. STEM is not something for individuals that look like me. Pure and simple. It shouldn't be that way. And what's so important for you as teachers is that you're the ones on the forefront. You're the ones that really have the ability to make an impact with students to help them believe that STEM can be for everyone. STEM is for all. Now, it's not. Now, we're not saying that we're need to force everyone to go into STEM, because personal interest. We understand that, but we have to be very sure in how we present things. Makes it sure that STEM is available for everyone. So what do I mean by that? We're going to watch another video. This was a commercial that Verizon made.
Who's my pretty girl?
9, 10, 11.
Sammy, sweetie, don't get your dress dirty.
Sam, honey, you don't want to mess with that. Let's put him down.
Samantha, this project has gotten out of control.
Whoa, hey, careful with that. Why don't you hand that to your brother?
Our words can have a huge impact. Isn't it time we told her she's pretty brilliant too? Encourage her love of science and technology and inspire her to change the world.
Now, I'm going to go back to that. 66% of fourth grade girls say they like science and math. 18% of college engineers are female. And that's something where it's heartbreaking, because you look at the fact of, in elementary school, all of your students have an excitement, have a passion for science, for STEM. They're inquisitive. They're asking these different questions. 66% of girls in 4th grade like science. They lack math. What happens? I even think about my own terminology, how the words that we use. How do I talk to my son compared to how do I talk to my daughter? What toys do we have? And when we think about these differences, how do we set up this world? So I want you to pause and I want you to just kind of take this in. What thoughts run through your head with the video? So, like I said, I mean, it's a pretty deep topic when we really start thinking about how science, and like I said initially, I never thought like, well, how do we talk about cultural irrelevancy in science? It's physics. I drop it, things fall down. It happens wherever. And there is a big call, there is a big need that we have to address when we're looking at science and equity issues in it. So, and it's important because, like I said, as teachers, you're the ones on the front line. You're the ones that really have the ability to empower students, not so much to say, hey, you're going to go into STEM, but at least so that they know that the door is open. So how do we do that? So we're going to talk about that in the next module, but I want you to think of some ways. What could you do in your classroom to address some of these issues of social justice and inequities that we face in STEM? I never had to face these growing up. So what do we do as a teacher to make sure that nobody has these issues in inequity? We'll talk to you next module, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. Thank you.